In Chicago's elite merchandise mart, an 84-year-old woman was about to inherit a multi-million-dollar consulting empire. What started as a family funeral took a shocking turn when they read Eleanor Chen's will. Angelistina Ford wasn't your typical senior citizen. For 5 years, she had quietly mastered cutting-edge technology consulting, known for solving problems that stumped Harvard MBAs. When she encountered her sister Diana's rage at being passed over, she had no idea she was walking into a corporate war. Angelistina's acceptance would lead to industry transformation. What began as grief would become vindication. Chicago's business world would never be the same after proving age means nothing when wisdom meets innovation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October wind cut through Graceland Cemetery with the kind of bitter precision that made Chicago famous for more than deep dish pizza. Angelistina Ford pulled her 15-year-old wool coat tighter as she watched the crowd gather around Eleanor Chen's graveside. At 84, she'd attended enough funerals to know the difference between genuine grief and performance art. Today's service was heavy on the latter. Her sister Diana commanded attention even in mourning, her Armani black suit tailored to perfection, her silver hair styled in that expensive bob that somehow managed to look both professional and appropriately somber. Diana moved through the crowd like a politician at a campaign event, accepting condolences while subtly positioning herself as Eleanor's natural successor. Such a tremendous loss for the business community, Diana murmured to Chicago's deputy mayor, her voice carrying just the right note of grief mixed with determination. But grandmother always said the company must continue her vision. I'm committed to ensuring that happens seamlessly. Angelistina watched from her folding chair in the back row, her arthritic hands folded over a small bouquet of daisies, Eleanor's favorite flowers, though she doubted anyone else remembered that detail. Tears traced silent paths down her weathered cheeks as the minister spoke about Eleanor's legacy of innovation and leadership. The expensive floral arrangements surrounding the casket were beautiful, but they lacked the personal touch Eleanor would have appreciated. Marcus Rodriguez, Chen Consulting Group's vice president, stood with the other company executives, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes alert. Angelistina had seen him at Eleanor's side during several of her monthly visits to the office, though she'd always been introduced simply as family. He seemed genuinely affected by Eleanor's passing, unlike some of the business associates who were already calculating opportunities. Family embarrassment, Diana had called her just last month when Angelistina had dared to offer an opinion about digital transformation at a family dinner. Maybe stick to topics you actually understand, like knitting. The comment had stung more than Angelistina let on, especially since she had just finished helping a small manufacturing company streamline their entire inventory system using cloud-based analytics. But Diana saw only what she wanted to see, an elderly sister who'd never followed conventional paths, never earned prestigious degrees, never climbed corporate ladders. James Chen, Eleanor's son and father to both sisters, sat between them with the expression of a man trying to hold together pieces of a puzzle that had never quite fit. His gentle nature had served him well as a literature professor, but family diplomacy had never been his strength. Angelistina caught his apologetic glance and offered a small smile. She didn't blame him for the lifetime of being overlooked. He'd simply never known how to value success that didn't come with traditional markers. After the burial, the family and key business associates gathered at the law offices of Morrison, Blake & Associates. The mahogany-paneled conference room felt heavy with expectation and barely concealed ambition. Diana sat at the head of the table as if she belonged there, occasionally touching her perfectly applied makeup with tissues that somehow never seemed to smudge. Robert Morrison, the family attorney, cleared his throat and began reading Eleanor's last will and testament. The preliminary bequests were predictable: charitable donations, personal items to various family members, a generous trust fund for James. Diana's confidence grew with each standard provision, her posture straightening as she prepared for her moment of triumph. Then, Morrison reached the section everyone had been waiting for. To my beloved granddaughter, Angelistina Ford, I leave my entire business empire, including Chen Consulting Group, all associated properties, accounts, and intellectual property to be transferred immediately upon my death.
The silence that followed was so complete that Angelestina could hear the antique clock ticking on Morrison's bookshelf. She felt the blood drain from her face as every eye in the room turned toward her. This couldn't be real. Eleanor never mentioned anything like this during their weekly tea visits. Diana's controlled composure cracked like ice under pressure. This is absolutely ridiculous. She can't possibly run that multi-million-dollar consulting firm. She doesn't even have a college degree. Her Harvard-trained composure had completely shattered. I've worked my entire career for this moment. I've sacrificed everything. My marriage, my partnership at Morrison & Associates, my reputation, to position myself as her successor, and she gives it to someone who lives in a studio apartment and fixes computers for corner stores? Diana, James said quietly, his own shock evident, but his protective instincts towards Angelestina finally surfacing after decades of dormancy. She's your sister. She's a family embarrassment. Diana's voice cracked with fury and disbelief. This company employs 300 people. It has Fortune 500 clients. You can't just hand it over to someone because she visits on weekends. Marcus had been watching this family drama unfold with growing fascination. Pieces of a puzzle he didn't know existed began clicking into place. Eleanor's mysterious weekly appointments, her occasional references to consulting with someone who sees patterns differently, the innovative solutions she'd sometimes presented that seemed to come from left field. Angelestina finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I don't understand. Eleanor never said, I never expected. But even as shock overwhelmed her, she felt something else stirring. A lifetime of being dismissed and overlooked suddenly crystallizing into something approaching anger. Diana's words echoed in her mind, family embarrassment, doesn't understand, too old, lacks credentials. Maybe it was time to show her sister that there were different kinds of wisdom, different measures of success, and different ways to lead. The inheritance was real. Eleanor had chosen her. Now she had to decide what to do with it. Marcus's hand hesitated on the brass doorknob of Angelestina's apartment building. 3 days had passed since the will reading, and the Chicago business community was already buzzing about speculation about Chen Consulting Group's unexpected succession. He'd come to discuss transition logistics, but the muffled voices echoing through the hallway suggested he wasn't the first visitor today. Through the thin walls of the converted warehouse building in Pilsen, he could hear Diana's voice, sharp and accusatory, cutting through what probably started as a civil conversation. Absolutely delusional if you think you can actually run that company.
And yet, Angelestina said quietly, settling into her ergonomic chair with the confidence of someone in their natural element, those same CEOs are struggling with digital transformations that I've been helping small businesses navigate for the past 5 years. She pulled up a file on one of her monitors, and Marcus found himself looking at a client list that made his eyebrows rise. Angelestina's consulting work wasn't limited to corner stores. She'd been working with manufacturers, logistics companies, and service providers throughout the Midwest, helping them modernize operations with budgets a fraction of what Chen Consulting Group typically required. You want to know what's really going on here? Angelestina's voice carried a steel that Marcus had never heard before. Diana can't accept that someone without her credentials might actually understand business. She spent so many years measuring success by degrees and titles and corner offices that she's forgotten what innovation actually looks like. Diana's composure cracked further. Don't lecture me about innovation. I've been closing million-dollar deals while you've been playing with computers in this converted warehouse. Playing with computers. Angelestina's laugh was sharp. Diana, show me one client you've helped transition from paper-based inventory to real-time supply chain management. Show me one manufacturing client you've guided through IoT integration. You practice law, not technology consulting. The accusation hit home. Marcus had worked with Diana on several projects over the past year, and while she was undoubtedly skilled at contract negotiation and legal compliance, her understanding of the technological solutions Chen Consulting Group actually provided was surface level at best. I don't need to understand every technical detail, Diana shot back. That's what technical staff is for. Leadership is about vision, strategy, client relationships. all of which require understanding the solutions you're selling, Angelistina interrupted. Eleanor knew that. It's why she spent our tea visits asking me about emerging trends, implementation challenges, scalability issues. She understood that in today's business environment, you can't lead what you don't comprehend. Diana moved toward the door, her retreat disguised as dramatic exit. This conversation is pointless. I'm contesting the will, Angelistina. Eleanor was 91 years old. I'll prove she wasn't competent to make business decisions of this magnitude. Eleanor was sharper than both of us combined until the day she died. And if you try to destroy her reputation to get what you think you deserve, you'll discover exactly how sharp I can be too. For a moment, the sisters stared at each other across 8 decades of sibling rivalry, accumulated resentments, and fundamental misunderstanding. Diana had always been the golden child. Harvard Law Review, successful career, society connections. Angelistina had been the quirky older sister who'd never quite fit the family's definition of success. But standing in this apartment, surrounded by evidence of Angelistina's hidden accomplishments, Marcus began to understand Eleanor's choice. Diana saw technology consulting as a business to be managed. Angelistina saw it as problems to be solved. "We'll see about that," Diana said finally, her voice cold with promise. "Enjoy playing CEO while you can. This company is too important to be left to someone's sentimental choice." She left without another word, her heels clicking angrily against the hardwood floors. The silence that followed felt heavy with possibility and threat in equal measure. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," Angelistina said after a moment, her shoulders sagging slightly as the adrenaline faded. "I wasn't imagining our first business meeting would go this way." Marcus found himself genuinely curious about this woman who just held her own against one of Chicago's most formidable lawyers. "Miss Ford, I have to ask, how long have you actually been doing technology consulting?" Angelistina's smile was tired but genuine. "Officially? About 5 years. Unofficially, I've been helping people navigate technological change since I taught myself programming in the 1980s. Most people see an 84-year-old woman and assume I can barely use email. Diana's made that assumption our entire lives." But Eleanor didn't. "No," Angelistina said softly. "Eleanor saw potential where others saw limitation. The question now is whether I can live up to her faith in me." As Marcus looked around the apartment again, at the sophisticated equipment, the complex diagrams, the evidence of a mind that had never stopped learning, he began to think that Eleanor's faith might have been well placed after all. Eleanor's private office at Chen Consulting Group remained exactly as she'd left it. Jasmine tea still fragrant in the porcelain cup on her desk, reading glasses folded beside a half-finished crossword puzzle, family photos arranged with the precise care of someone who understood that memories required intentional preservation. Angelistina stood in the doorway, her new key card feeling foreign in her weathered hands, overwhelmed by the weight of stepping into a space that had been Eleanor's sanctuary for 30 years. The office occupied a corner of the 32nd floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of Lake Michigan. Eleanor had always said she did her best thinking while watching the water change colors with the weather and seasons. Today, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, their gray shadows racing across the choppy surface like thoughts trying to outrun doubt. Marcus had offered to help with the transition, but Angelistina had asked for time alone first. She needed to understand Eleanor's world before she could hope to lead it. The mahogany desk held the expected items: Mont Blanc pens, leather-bound calendars, a crystal paperweight that caught the afternoon light. But it was the locked drawer that drew her attention, its brass key plate worn smooth by decades of use. The key was exactly where Eleanor had always kept it, taped to the underside of her tea saucer, hidden in plain sight like so many of her secrets. Inside the drawer, Angelistina found a manila folder marked "For Angelistina" in Eleanor's precise handwriting, along with a stack of bound journals that chronicled not just business decisions, but family observations that spanned decades.
The first letter was dated just 2 months ago. My dearest Angelistina, if you're reading this, then my gamble has paid off, and you've inherited more than you bargained for. I can imagine your shock. You were always too humble to see your own worth, too accepting of others' limited vision of what you could become. Diana will be furious, of course. She spent so many years measuring success by degrees and titles in corner offices that she's forgotten what innovation actually looks like. You've been my secret weapon for 5 years now, though you never realized it. Every Tuesday when you visited for tea, you gave me insights that transformed how this company approaches technological change. Remember when you explained why that manufacturing client's productivity had plateaued? Your observation about human workflow patterns led to our most successful process optimization in a decade. When you showed me how small businesses were using mobile technology to compete with larger corporations, it revolutionized our client strategies. Diana sees you as the family embarrassment because you've never followed conventional paths. I see you as proof that wisdom transcends age and that the most valuable perspectives often come from unexpected sources. Angelistina's hands trembled as she continued reading. Eleanor had documented conversations that Angelistina had forgotten, casual observations that had apparently sparked major business innovations. What she thought were simple family visits had actually been strategic consulting sessions disguised as grandmother-granddaughter bonding. The journals revealed even more. Eleanor's entries painted a picture of family dynamics that was both familiar and heartbreaking. September 15th. Diana visited today, but only to discuss her promotion timeline. She spent 20 minutes outlining her strategic vision for the company, which was essentially a regurgitation of Harvard Business Review articles. When I mentioned that one of her proposed efficiency metrics might negatively impact employee morale, she dismissed the concern as soft management thinking. She still doesn't understand that sustainable success requires balancing innovation with humanity. September 22nd. Angelistina helped me understand why our cloud migration project failed. She explained that we'd focused on technical specifications without considering user adoption patterns. Her insights about change management came from helping a 70-year-old bakery owner transition to digital ordering systems. Sometimes the smallest scale reveals the biggest truths. October 3rd. James called worried about Angelistina's lack of direction now that she's in her 80s. He asked if I could convince her to consider retirement communities. It broke my heart. Neither he nor Diana has ever bothered to visit her workspace or understand what she's built. They see only what they expect to see, an aging woman who doesn't fit their definition of success. The pattern became clear as Angelistina read through months of entries. Eleanor had been systematically testing business theories against Angelistina's real-world experience, using her insights to guide company strategy while carefully protecting her role as informal advisor. Diana's visits focused on positioning and politics. Angelistina's conversations centered on problem-solving and innovation. A knock at the door interrupted her reading. Marcus stood in the doorway, his expression concerned but respectful. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I want
500 client spends. Sometimes constraint breeds innovation in ways that unlimited resources can't." She moved to his computer screen, which displayed a workflow optimization project for a mid-sized manufacturer. "This looks like a classic ERP integration challenge. Have you considered how third-shift workers will adapt to the new interface? They often have different technology comfort levels than day staff, but their productivity insights are usually the most valuable." David's skepticism wavered as Angelistina pointed out several implementation pitfalls he hadn't considered. Her questions weren't theoretical. They came from real experience with similar transitions. The next stop was the conference room where department heads had gathered for Angelistina's first leadership meeting. The tension was palpable as senior consultants, project managers, and business development specialists filed in, their expressions ranging from polite curiosity to barely disguised concern about the company's future. Diana was already seated at the far end of the conference table, her posture perfect and her smile professionally neutral. She'd clearly spent the weekend strategizing how to handle this meeting, how to maintain her influence while publicly accepting the new reality. "Before we begin," Diana said as the last person took their seat, "I want everyone to know that I'm fully committed to supporting Angelistina during this transition. Family loyalty comes first, even when circumstances are unexpected." The words were perfectly chosen to sound supportive while subtly undermining. Even when circumstances are unexpected, code for even when elderly relatives make questionable decisions. But Angelistina had spent the weekend reading Eleanor's strategic assessments of each department head, understanding not just their roles, but their personalities and motivations. She stood at the head of the table with a confidence that surprised everyone, including herself. "I know you're all wondering what qualifies an 84-year-old woman to lead a consulting firm. The honest answer is that conventional qualifications don't, but unconventional perspective might." She activated the conference room's presentation system with practiced ease, pulling up a slide she'd prepared that morning. Chen Consulting Group has built its reputation on helping established businesses adapt to technological change. But most of our strategies focus on enterprise-level solutions that smaller companies can't afford or implement. The slide showed market research that several people in the room recognized, their own analysis of untapped business segments. There are 60,000 small to medium businesses in the Chicago metro area alone. Most are struggling with the same digital transformation challenges as our Fortune 500 clients, but they need solutions that are scalable, cost-effective, and implementable with limited IT support. Sarah Kim, a junior consultant fresh from Northwestern's Kellogg School, raised her hand tentatively. "Miss Ford, are you suggesting we pivot towards smaller clients? That would mean lower margins, more complex support requirements. I'm suggesting we develop solutions that work at any scale. The manufacturer I helped last month increased productivity by 23% using cloud-based analytics that cost less than most companies spend on coffee. The strategies that work for small businesses often reveal efficiencies that larger organizations have overlooked." She clicked to the next slide, showing a case study from her own consulting work. A family-owned logistics company that had streamlined their entire operation using innovative scheduling software and automated inventory tracking. This company went from losing money to achieving 15% profit margins in 18 months, not because they had unlimited resources, but because they were willing to question assumptions about how work gets done. The room's energy shifted as people leaned forward, genuinely engaged despite their initial skepticism. These were smart people who recognized innovative thinking when they saw it, regardless of its source. Marcus caught Diana's expression and noticed the first crack in her composed facade. Her sister wasn't just surviving this meeting, she was demonstrating exactly the kind of strategic vision that Eleanor had always valued. "The question isn't whether I'm qualified to run this company using traditional metrics. The question is whether this company is ready to expand its definition of what consulting excellence looks like." As the meeting progressed into detailed discussions about client acquisition strategies and implementation methodologies, something remarkable happened. The department heads stopped talking around Angelistina and started talking with her. Her questions revealed gaps in their standard approaches, her suggestions offered solutions they hadn't considered, and her experience provided context that their business school training had missed. By the time the meeting ended, the atmosphere in the room had shifted from skeptical tolerance to cautious optimism. Sarah Kim lingered after the others left, her expression thoughtful. "Miss Ford, I have to admit, when you inherited the company, I was worried about the company's direction, but your approach to scalable solutions, it's exactly what the industry needs. Where did you learn to think about consulting that way?" Angelistina smiled, remembering Eleanor's words about flowers that bloom late but burn brightest. Sometimes the best education comes from solving real problems for people who can't afford to fail. As she gathered her papers and prepared to tackle the rest of her first day as owner, Angelistina felt the weight of responsibility settling around her like a familiar coat. It was daunting, certainly, but no longer overwhelming.
She had work to do. 2 weeks into Angelestina's tenure as owner, Sarah Kim arrived at the office early, her usual morning routine disrupted by a nagging sense that something wasn't right. The 26th floor was quiet, except for the hum of servers and the distant sound of Chicago traffic 30 stories below. She'd planned to use the extra time to review client proposals, but as she passed the conference room, she heard Diana's voice speaking in the kind of hushed tones that meant confidential business. "I understand your concerns, Michael," Diana was saying into her phone, her back turned to the glass door. "Believe me, we're all struggling with this transition. An 84-year-old woman inheriting a consulting firm? It's unprecedented for a reason." Sarah froze, her hand halfway to the coffee machine. She knew she should keep walking, but Diana's next words made her blood run cold. "Look, between you and me, the family is exploring options. Eleanor wasn't exactly in her right mind those last few months. We're hoping to resolve this quietly before it affects client relationships. But if you're concerned about contract stability, I completely understand." Michael Brennan was CEO of Midwest Manufacturing, one of Chen Consulting Group's most important clients. His company represented nearly $2 million in annual revenue, and his satisfaction often influenced other industrial clients in the region. No, don't make any hasty decisions," Diana continued, her voice taking on the smooth persuasiveness that had made her a successful lawyer. "Give us 30 days to sort this out internally. I can personally guarantee that the service quality you're accustomed to won't be affected by these temporary circumstances." Sarah's stomach twisted as she understood the implication. Diana was essentially promising clients that Angelestina's ownership would be temporary, that normal leadership would be restored once the family sorted things out. It was corporate sabotage disguised as damage control. She slipped away before Diana finished the call, her mind racing. This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was a deliberate attempt to undermine the company's stability by creating doubt about its leadership. And it was working. Over the past week, Sarah had noticed subtle changes in client interactions. Longer response times to proposals, more requests for additional assurances about project continuity, questions about the company's strategic direction that hadn't existed before Eleanor's death. The morning passed in a blur of internal conflict. She threw herself into her work, trying to process what she'd overheard while analyzing quarterly performance reports for Angelestina's review. The numbers told a troubling story. 3 clients had requested contract renegotiations, 2 had asked for timeline extensions that effectively delayed payments, and 5 potential new projects had suddenly gone quiet. At lunch, she watched Diana hold court in the executive dining room, surrounded by senior staff members who hung on her every word. Diana's influence within the company was undeniable. She'd worked there for 2 years, had relationships with most department heads, and possessed the kind of institutional knowledge that took time to build. By contrast, Angelestina was still learning people's names and trying to understand the complex web of client relationships that kept the business running. Earth to Sarah, called David Martinez, the consultant she'd worked on several projects with. He slid into the chair across from her, his lunch tray clattering against the table. "You look like someone ran over your laptop. Everything okay?" Sarah hesitated. David was sharp, ambitious, and generally well-liked, but she wasn't sure where his loyalties lay in the emerging Ford-Chen family drama. "Just thinking about the Brennan manufacturing proposal," she said carefully. "Have you noticed anything unusual about client communications lately?" David's expression grew thoughtful. "Funny you should ask. I've been working on the Richardson logistics expansion, and they've suddenly gotten very concerned about project oversight. Asked specifically about who would be managing strategic decisions if the project encountered complications." "Did they mention why they were concerned?" "Not directly, but the subtext was pretty clear. They've heard rumors about instability."
Miss Ford, I want you to know that I don't think she's acting in the company's best interests. What she's doing isn't just undermining you, it's creating instability that could damage client relationships permanently. For a long moment, Angelistina sat in silence, processing this confirmation of what she'd probably suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a sadness that made Sarah's chest ache. Diana has always measured success by traditional metrics, Angelistina said slowly. Position, recognition, control. I think she genuinely believes that my leadership will harm the company, so she's trying to minimize what she sees as damage. What are you going to do? Angelistina stood, her movements careful but determined. I'm going to prove her wrong, and I'm going to do it in a way that protects the company's interests, even if it means protecting Diana from the consequences of her own actions. As Sarah watched her new boss walk toward the elevator, she realized that she just witnessed something remarkable. A leader choosing grace over revenge, long-term strategy over short-term satisfaction. It was exactly the kind of principled decision-making that Eleanor had valued, and exactly the kind of leadership that Diana, for all her credentials, had never demonstrated. The question now was whether grace would be enough to overcome sabotage, and whether principled leadership could survive in a world where success often required fighting fire with fire. The weekend after Sarah's revelation, Angelistina's Pilsen apartment transformed into a war room. Her dining table disappeared under stacks of client files, market research, and technological white papers. Zoe Park arrived Saturday morning with coffee, pastries, and the kind of fierce determination that had made her a successful entrepreneur in her own right. So, Zoe said, settling into Angelistina's ergonomic chair and surveying the organized chaos, Diana wants to play dirty? Let's show her what happens when you underestimate someone who's been fighting uphill battles for 84 years. At 82, Zoe possessed the sharp wit and strategic mind that had helped her build a successful graphic design business in the pre-digital era and transform it into a cutting-edge digital marketing firm. She'd been Angelistina's closest friend for 30 years and her business partner for 5, the only person who'd never questioned whether an octogenarian could master emerging technologies. I don't want to destroy Diana, Angelistina said, pulling up client satisfaction reports on her laptop. I want to prove that Eleanor's faith in me was justified. Those aren't mutually exclusive goals, honey. Sometimes the best revenge is massive success. They spent the morning analyzing Chen Consulting Group's client portfolio, identifying patterns that revealed both opportunities and vulnerabilities. Eleanor's company had built its reputation on high-touch, premium consulting for established corporations, but the market was shifting toward more agile, cost-effective solutions that could be implemented quickly and scaled efficiently. Look at this, Angelistina said, highlighting data from her own consulting work. I helped a 70-employee logistics company increase efficiency by 30% using tools that cost less than what most of your corporate clients spend on quarterly team-building retreats. Zoe leaned over the screen, her reading glasses perched on her nose. And this Richardson Logistics project that David mentioned, they're struggling with the same challenges, but your team is proposing a solution that costs 4 times as much and takes 6 months longer to implement. Because we're thinking like a big consulting firm instead of thinking like problem solvers. By Sunday evening, they had outlined a presentation that would revolutionize Chen Consulting Group's approach to client solutions. Instead of selling expensive, complex implementations, Angelistina proposed a tiered service model that could scale from small businesses to Fortune 500 companies, using the same core technologies and methodologies, but adapted to different resource levels and timeline requirements. Monday morning brought news that crystallized the urgency of their work. Marcus arrived at Angelistina's office with a grim expression and a printed email. Richardson Logistics is terminating their contract, he said without preamble. They're citing concerns about project continuity and leadership stability. Their CEO specifically mentioned uncertainty about the company's strategic direction under new management. Angelistina felt the words like a physical blow.
Richardson represented $800,000 in revenue and served as a reference client for other mid-sized manufacturers in the region. Losing them would create a domino effect that could devastate the company's reputation. "How much damage control can we do?" she asked. "Honestly, not much. The termination notice includes a clause that prevents us from discussing the project publicly, so we can't even defend our work quality. And word travels fast in the manufacturing sector." That afternoon, Angelistina called an emergency all-hands meeting. The conference room filled quickly, the atmosphere heavy with tension and unspoken concerns. Diana arrived last, her usual punctuality abandoned for an entrance that suggested she was doing everyone a favor by showing up. She dressed down for the occasion. Designer jeans instead of her usual business attire, cashmere sweater instead of structured blazer. But her posture remained rigid with defensive preparation. "I can't stay long," she announced before anyone could speak. "I have a conference call with the Morrison Blake partners at 8. "On Sunday evening?" James asked, his tone gentle but pointed. "Business doesn't follow convenient schedules, Dad. Unlike some people, I don't have the luxury of treating professional responsibilities as optional." The barb was clearly aimed at Angelistina, who'd spent 30 years choosing flexibility over conventional success. But instead of the wounded silence that had characterized her responses to Diana's criticisms for decades, Angelistina met her sister's gaze directly. "You're right. I never treated professional responsibilities as optional. I've just never confused being busy with being effective." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees as Diana's carefully maintained composure cracked. "Are you seriously going to lecture me about effectiveness? You, who spent 30 years floating between part-time jobs and volunteer work? I spent 30 years learning how to solve problems for people who couldn't afford to pay for solutions that didn't work. Maybe that's why Eleanor trusted me with her company instead of trusting you."
James stepped between his daughters before the conversation could escalate further, but he could feel the decades of accumulated resentment crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. "Stop," he said, his voice carrying an authority that surprised all three of them. "Just stop. This is exactly what your grandmother was afraid of." He moved to the window that overlooked Eleanor's carefully tended garden, where autumn flowers still bloomed despite the approaching winter. "Your mother left me a letter, too," he said quietly. "Did you know that? A letter explaining why she made the choices she did, why she chose Angelistina over Diana, why she was worried about what would happen to this family after she was gone." Both sisters went very still. Neither had known about James' letter. "She was afraid," James continued, "that you would destroy each other fighting over things that don't actually matter. Position, recognition, who gets to be seen as the successful one. She was afraid that Diana would never learn to value wisdom over credentials, and that Angelistina would never learn to value herself at all." He turned back to face his daughters, these two women who'd spent their lives seeking his approval in completely different ways. "She was right to be afraid, because that's exactly what's happening." Diana's facade of control finally crumbled. "Of course she was worried about me. Everyone's always worried about ambitious women. We're too aggressive, too focused, too threatening to people who prefer us quiet and accommodating. But Angelistina, sweet, harmless Angelistina who never asked for anything, never demanded recognition, never made anyone uncomfortable, she's the perfect choice because she doesn't threaten anyone's assumptions about how women should behave." "Is that really what you think?" Angelistina asked, her voice soft but steady. "That I've spent my life being harmless? Haven't you? You've made a career out of being underestimated, out of letting people dismiss you so they'll feel comfortable enough to accept your help. You've hidden your intelligence behind self-deprecation and your ambition behind service to others. It's the perfect camouflage for someone who doesn't want to be seen as threatening. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge, and James watched his older daughter process words that cut closer to truth than either sister wanted to acknowledge. "You're right," Angelistina said finally. "I have spent my life being underestimated, but not because I was hiding my intelligence. Because people like you taught me that my intelligence didn't matter unless it came with the right credentials, the right background, the right age." She stood up, her movements careful but determined. "Do you know what I learned this month, Diana? I learned that Eleanor saw value in me that I'd never been allowed to see in myself. She saw someone who could solve problems, who could lead people, who could build something meaningful. All things I'd been doing for years, but nobody noticed because they weren't packaged in the kind of success story that gets recognition." Diana's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for weeks. "And what about what I built? 30 years of career achievement, 2 law degrees, partnerships at prestigious firms. What about the sacrifices I made, the opportunities I created, the respect I earned?" "All of which matter," Angelistina said gently. "All of which have value. But Eleanor needed someone who understood technology consulting, not corporate law. Someone who could innovate, not just negotiate. Someone who saw problems from the ground up, not just from the boardroom down." "So, everything I've worked for just doesn't count?" James finally understood the source of his younger daughter's rage. Diana hadn't just lost an inheritance. She'd lost the validation that her entire life's work had been building toward. The success she'd sacrificed so much to achieve suddenly seemed irrelevant in the face of Eleanor's choice. "Diana," he said softly, "your achievements count. Your intelligence counts. Your dedication counts. But they don't count more than Angelistina's achievements just because they're more visible." He moved to sit between his daughters, these 2 brilliant women who'd spent their lives competing for recognition that should have been freely given. "I failed both of you," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I failed Diana by teaching her that love had to be earned through achievement, and I failed Angelistina by never helping her understand that her achievements were worthy of recognition." The silence that followed was different from the hostile tension that had filled the room earlier. It was the silence of people processing truths they'd never been brave enough to speak out loud. "I don't know how to not be angry," Diana whispered finally. "I don't know how to accept that everything I thought I was working toward was wrong." "It wasn't wrong," Angelistina said, reaching across the space between their chairs to touch her sister's hand. "It was just different from what Eleanor needed. And maybe there's room in this world for both kinds of success."
I think we're the only ones who can do it. Your credibility with corporate clients, my experience with scalable solutions, our combined knowledge of the market and the competition. Diana, we could build something unprecedented." For several minutes, Diana studied the proposal in silence, her lawyer's mind analyzing every clause and implication, while her sister's heart grappled with the possibility of redemption. The financial projections were aggressive, but realistic. The organizational structure was innovative, but practical. And the market positioning was exactly what the industry needed. "There would have to be clear boundaries," she said finally. "Defined areas of authority, established protocols for decision-making, accountability measures for both of us." "Absolutely. I've included a draft agreement that covers all of those issues. Marcus helped me understand the legal requirements, but I wanted your input on the practical implementation." Diana picked up the partnership agreement, her expression shifting from skeptical to surprised to genuinely impressed as she read through the carefully crafted language. This wasn't the work of someone playing at business leadership. This was the product of serious strategic thinking and detailed planning. "You've been working on this since our family meeting," she realized. "I've been working on this since the day I inherited the company," Angelistina corrected. "I just finally figured out how to make it work." The morning sun had fully risen now, flooding the conference room with warm light that made the lake sparkle like scattered diamonds. Outside, Chicago was waking up to another day of business and ambition, competition and collaboration, the endless dance of people trying to build something meaningful with their limited time on Earth. "I need time to think about this," Diana said, carefully stacking the documents. "This isn't just a business decision. It's a complete reconfiguration of how we relate to each other. Take all the time you need. But Diana, I hope you'll consider that this might be our chance to build something together, instead of continuing to tear each other apart." As Diana gathered her things and prepared to leave, she paused at the conference room door. "Angelistina? Thank you. For this opportunity, for your grace after my behavior, for seeing possibilities I couldn't see. Thank you for being willing to consider them." After Diana left, Angelistina remained in the conference room, watching the city come alive below her. The partnership proposal represented more than just a business strategy. It was a gamble on the possibility that family wounds could heal, that competition could transform into collaboration, and that two very different kinds of success could combine to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Whether Diana would accept the offer remained to be seen, but for the first time since inheriting Eleanor's company, Angelistina felt like she was building towards something rather than just responding to crisis. And sometimes, building towards something was enough. The emergency that would test everything began with a phone call at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Marcus's voice strained with the kind of controlled panic that meant serious trouble. Woke Angelistina from the first sound sleep she'd managed in weeks. "Westfield Industries just called," he said without preamble. "They're pulling out of the 3-year modernization contract, effective immediately. Their board met in emergency session last night and voted to terminate." Angelistina sat up in bed, her mind immediately racing through the implications while she already reached for the clothes she'd laid out the night before. Her morning routine compressed into urgent efficiency. "What reason did they give?" she asked, already reaching for the clothes she'd laid out the night before. Her morning routine compressed into urgent efficiency. "Concerns about strategic direction and leadership continuity. But Angelistina, there's more. They're not just terminating our contract, they're moving to Hartwell and Associates." The name hit like a physical blow. Hartwell and Associates was Chen Consulting Group's primary competitor, a traditional firm known for conservative approaches and establishment credentials. They were exactly the kind of company that would capitalize on rumors about leadership instability. "I'll be there in an hour," Angelistina said. "Call an emergency leadership meeting for 8:30. And Marcus, call Diana too." By the time Angelistina arrived at the office, the atmosphere was thick with barely controlled crisis. Word of Westfield's defection had spread through the company like wildfire, and employees clustered in nervous conversations that stopped abruptly when she passed. The quarterly financial reports she'd been reviewing just yesterday showed how precarious the company's position would become without Westfield's revenue. Diana was already in the conference room when Angelistina arrived, her usual composed demeanor replaced by the focused intensity of someone facing a genuine emergency. She'd clearly spent the morning making calls. Her notepad was covered with phone numbers and talking points, and her laptop displayed spreadsheets analyzing the contract's termination clauses. "I've been reaching out to contacts at other major accounts. Brennan Manufacturing is reviewing their consulting relationships. Peterson Logistics wants to discuss concerns about service continuity. 3 other clients have requested meetings to clarify expectations about project management." The domino effect was already beginning. In the consulting world, reputation was everything, and losing a major client created doubt that spread faster than wildfire through industry networks. Marcus entered with Sarah Kim and Jennifer Walsh, their expressions grim but determined. Sarah carried a laptop loaded with client communication analysis, while Jennifer had printed copies of competitive intelligence reports that showed Hartwell's recent aggressive expansion in their market segment. "How bad is it?" Angelistina asked, settling into her chair with the calm authority she developed over the past month. "Bad," Marcus said bluntly. "If we lose 2 more major clients, we'll have to consider layoffs. If we lose 4, we're looking at fundamental restructuring or potential bankruptcy." Diana's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen with an expression that made everyone in the room tense. "That was Robert Hartwell himself," she said slowly. "He wants to have lunch today to discuss opportunities for collaboration in light of recent market changes." The euphemism was transparent. Hartwell was offering to acquire Chen Consulting Group's client portfolio and possibly absorb key personnel, essentially dismantling Eleanor's company while eliminating a competitor. "We're not selling," Angelistina said firmly, "and we're not collaborating with vultures who profit from our crisis." "Then what do you propose?" Diana asked, her voice sharp with stress. "Because traditional damage control isn't going to work here. The industry rumor mill has decided that an 84-year-old woman can't run a major consulting firm, and Westfield's defection just validated those rumors." Angelistina looked around the conference table. At these people who'd become more than employees over the past month, they'd become her team, her collaborators in building something Eleanor would have been proud of. Sarah Kim's unwavering integrity, Marcus's operational expertise, Jennifer's market knowledge, and yes, Diana's fierce intelligence and client relationship skills. "Then you prove the rumors wrong," she said, "not by defending ourselves, but by demonstrating value that our competitors can't match." She moved to the whiteboard and began sketching a strategy that combined everything they'd learned about scalable solutions, client retention, and market positioning. "Diana, your contacts in the legal and compliance sectors, are any of them facing regulatory challenges that require rapid technology implementation?" Diana's mind immediately shifted into strategic mode. Morrison Blake has 3 clients dealing with new data privacy regulations. Sterling and Associates is struggling with compliance automation for their financial services portfolio. Why? Because traditional consulting firms like Hartwell think in terms of 6-month implementation timelines and million-dollar budgets. But we can deliver compliance solutions in 6 weeks for a fraction of the cost using the modular systems I've been developing. Sarah caught on immediately. "You're talking about turning our crisis into a competitive advantage. While Hartwell is focused on poaching our existing clients, we capture market segments they can't serve effectively." Exactly. "Marcus, how quickly can we deploy the small business solutions as enterprise modules? Can we scale them up for mid-tier clients who need enterprise-level functionality but don't have enterprise budgets?" Marcus pulled up technical specifications on his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he calculated resource requirements and implementation timelines. Give me 2 weeks and a dedicated development team, and I can create a solution framework that serves companies with 50 to 500 employees. It would undercut traditional consulting costs by 60% while delivering results in half the time. Jennifer was already reaching for her phone. I know 12 prospects who've been priced out of traditional consulting engagements. If we can deliver proven solutions at accessible price points, we could replace Westfield's revenue within 6 months. The energy in the room transformed as crisis shifted into opportunity. Instead of defending against attacks, they were positioning for offense. Instead of trying to match Hartwell's traditional approach, they were creating a new market category that played to their unique strengths. "There's something else," Diana said, her voice carrying a note of excitement that hadn't been there since Eleanor's funeral. "My legal contacts aren't just looking for technology solutions, they're looking for consulting partners who understand both legal requirements and..."
6 months ago, I thought I was losing my family to old rivalries and misunderstandings, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Tonight, I see what Eleanor saw all along, that my daughters were never competitors for my love or approval. They were partners who just needed the right opportunity to discover what they could accomplish together. The celebration continued late into the evening, with conversations that mixed business strategy with family stories, industry networking with genuine friendship. Zoe Park, resplendent in a vintage dress that somehow managed to look both timeless and cutting edge, regaled the table of young consultants with stories about building businesses before the internet existed, proving that adaptability and creativity transcended generational boundaries. As the evening wound down, Angelistina found herself on the hotel's terrace, looking out at Lake Michigan where sailboats dotted the water like scattered thoughts. Diana joined her, carrying 2 cups of jasmine tea, Eleanor's favorite blend, which had become their tradition for important conversations. "Do you think she knew?" Diana asked, settling into the chair beside her sister. "Do you think Eleanor knew we'd end up here?" Angelistina considered the question, thinking about the letters that had revealed Eleanor's careful orchestration of events that seemed spontaneous. "I think she hoped. I think she saw possibilities that neither of us could see, and she created conditions that would allow those possibilities to emerge." "I owe you an apology," Diana said quietly. "Not just for the sabotage, but for decades of making you feel like your contributions didn't matter. You were building something remarkable all along. I was just too proud to see it." "And I owe you gratitude," Angelistina replied. "Your expertise and relationships were essential to everything we've accomplished. Eleanor was right. This company needed both of us, just not in the ways either of us expected." The sisters sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights of the city reflect on the water like promises of future possibilities. Somewhere in the ballroom behind them, their team was planning next quarter's initiatives. Their father was sharing stories about Eleanor's business philosophy, and their employees were celebrating belonging to something larger than themselves. "What do you think comes next?" Diana asked. Angelistina smiled, feeling Eleanor's presence in the evening breeze that carried the scent of spring flowers from the hotel's gardens. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together, and we'll do it in a way that honors both traditional wisdom and innovative thinking." As they prepared to rejoin the celebration, Diana paused at the terrace door. "You know, I think Eleanor would be proud of us, not just for saving the company, but for finally becoming the sisters she always believed we could be." "She is proud of us," Angelistina said with quiet certainty. "And tomorrow we get to keep proving that she was right to have faith in both of us." The evening ended with toasts to Eleanor's memory, promises of continued innovation, and the kind of family embrace that had taken 84 years to achieve, but would last for whatever time they had left together. Chen Consulting Group had become more than a business. It had become proof that it's never too late to redefine success, rebuild relationships, and create something meaningful from the broken pieces of what came before. The city lights blurred past her window like shooting stars, each one carrying the promise that tomorrow would bring new challenges to solve, new relationships to build, and new opportunities to prove that the best chapters of any story can be written at any age. In her apartment that night, surrounded by the technology that had become her bridge between traditional wisdom and innovative solutions, Angelistina Ford fell asleep knowing that she had finally become the person Eleanor had always seen when she looked at her. Someone worthy of trust, capable of leadership, and valuable exactly as she was. The family embarrassment had become the family foundation, and the inheritance of worth had proven to be the most valuable legacy of all. The city lights blurred past her window like shooting stars, each one carrying the promise that tomorrow would bring new challenges to solve, new relationships to build, and new opportunities to prove that the best chapters of any story can be written at any age.